Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the midweek Bible study for the East Allen County Church of Christ. We want to talk a little bit about the things that we see that are created in this world, the things that prove God's existence just through their existence. It's not hard for us if we walk out on a starry night to look up in the sky and realize how magnificent all of this is. Or maybe you've been at a valley somewhere and you've driven through the valley and you can see the majesty of the mountains, or you've been on a mountaintop and you can see all of the beauty of what's created around you. Or maybe you've been away from the earth. Maybe you're an astronaut or something, or maybe you've seen pictures, but the earth is a beautiful marble, a ball, if you will. It is a magnificent thing to say the least. But throughout history, people have understood, either because God spoke directly through His Word to them to tell them, or because they, with their own common sense, put together the concept that this magnificent beauty we see around us is not just something that happens from nothing. The heavens and the earth tell us not only that God exists, they give us some hints as to the kind of God the Creator is. Having been in Central America, I can tell you that the birds are amazing in their color. Of course, all the life down there, and in most places really is, but the thing that I found amazing in Panama, when I spent a little bit of time there, was the beauty and the size of the birds. I had a parakeet when I was a boy growing up, and a little blue and yellow Petey, the parakeet, and but when I saw how large those birds were in those triple canopy forest jungles down there, it was truly amazing. They're absolutely beautiful, but you can't keep looking up because there's some things on the ground called caiman, and they are a very mean-spirited, smaller version of an alligator / crocodile that you don't want to step on because you weren't looking. But anyway, that's another story for another time. The Apostle Paul used some really strong language when he talked about the value of creation and how it teaches us about God. He says that man is left without excuse. In Romans 1, verses 19 and 20, we see this: "For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse." Romans 1, 19 and 20. Most people who look up in the sky at night do not walk away with the idea that somehow this all just occurred, that it just happened. Let's take a look at Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. In Genesis 1, we find, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." He's very specific about this. You either accept this or you don't. But God's not saying that we have an option to believe this if we choose to believe Him. Now, there are those in this world who don't believe God created the earth. They believe, for a variety of reasons, that somehow this all came to be, that it all came to being. And they use the Big Bang Theory, and then they attach a lot of theoretical ideas to how that came to be. The problem is that in science, if science is really what you trust, then you have to understand that something never scientifically comes from nothing. In Genesis 1, we ask ourselves the question, and God answers the question for us: who is it that created all this? Where did it all come from? God declares that He created the heavens and the earth in verse 1. He declares it. Now, some would say, but we can say anything. Where's the proof? Okay, well, Romans chapter 1, verses 18, 19, and following simply tell us that the creation's existence is proof of what God said. If I told you that I was a person who was a great banker, a great financial person, and I had all the great advice for anyone who wanted to know how to make money and become a millionaire overnight. I could do it, and we could make you rich. You might say, well, okay, where's the proof? Is it in your education? Is it in your ability to do that? Have you made money for yourself? I mean, where's the proof? God says, I made the heavens and the earth. And you'd say, where's the proof? Well, it's the heavens and the earth. If I would declare to you that I'm some financial genius, but I'm poor as a church mouse, as they used to say, then I'm not proving my point. I don't have any evidence to show my point. The evidence of God is where you're standing, what you're standing on. It's gravity. It's the stars at night. It's the planets that we don't even know exist that circulate around those stars. Some we do and some we don't, but we know there's a great deal more out there than we have, than we presently understand. So for people who would challenge God and they would say to themselves, well, I would believe God exists if he would just show himself. Well, when you come out and you see the beauty of his creation, you're seeing God. I don't mean that God is a mountain or he's in a hill or he's in a squirrel, but what I mean is that when you see that creation, you see the evidence of the fact that he's come through here. He's done this. He's done all this. Let's take a look at Isaiah 40 verses 21 and following. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been declared to you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. He it is who reduces rulers to nothing, who makes judges of the earth meaningless. Now, the type of language being used here in Isaiah is not a disparaging language. It is comparative. In other words, God's not trying to say, these other people, these rulers, these judges, these are people that you should just disdain. What he's saying, though, is whoever you think the wisest or the most powerful individual is that you can think of. Maybe it's the President of the United States. It is said that the President of the U.S. leads 2/3 of the free world. I don't know if that's true or not. Historically, it seems to hold up at times. Other times we wonder. But whoever you think the most powerful person at that moment is, some say that mothers are the most powerful person because in all of our lives, we've all had to have mothers. We've all needed that kind of love and that kind of attention. And fathers, who is the most powerful? Whoever you think that is, and who you really, truly in your heart believes is the most powerful, God is the most powerful. He's more powerful than them. And this verse goes on, these verses go on. Scarcely have they been planted, scarcely have they been sown, scarcely has their stock taken root in the earth. But he merely blows on them, and they wither. And the storm carries them away like stubble. That, again, this is not a comment on the value of authoritative people in the world or of people who take care of us or people whom we attribute power to. It is to say that God is always more powerful. It is to say that God is always greater. To whom then will you liken me that I would be his equal, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these stars, the one who leads forth their hosts by number. He calls them all by name because of the greatness of his might and the strength of his power. Not one of them is missing. As inhabitants of a world that God has made, do we have the power to do anything that would overthrow God's rule? Now, the answer to that is, both yes and no. Do we have the power to overthrow his rule? We can't overthrow his rule, but we most certainly can reject his rule. And some would say, well, what's the difference? What God has planned to be will be. I can't stop it. You can't stop it. As we have always, there's an old saying when I was growing up. My mom used to call me a monkey all the time. One monkey is not going to stop this show. In other words, if I decide not to go along with the program, God's still going to be God, and his plan's still going to be his plan. Now, can I reject him? And the answer is yes. I can reject God. I can obstinately walk away and ignore the evidence around me, his creation, ignore all that, and say to myself, well, I'm not going to listen to God. I'm going to go by my own plan. I'm going to do my own thing. And I'm going to take what comes as a result of that. Well, you will take what comes as a result of that. I will take what comes. But the question will always be, what should I have done? What will I do now? I hope that you're a person who looks at the creation around you and realizes that God made these things. God is real. I know that the world has a way sometimes. Satan, the father of all lies, wants to tell us that God is not there, that God doesn't care if he is there, that he's not powerful. If he were good, why wouldn't he stop all the... I mean, you hear all these questions, and they originate with Satan. He's the father of all lies. He brought them into existence. People didn't create them. They're not personal thoughts of geniuses. They're the mutterings of people who fail to understand and don't wish to acknowledge God for being God. I just want to ask you this question. When you look around at the beauty of creation, what do you see? And remember and look at Romans chapter 1 and realize that God placed the beauty of creation where it is so that we would be humbled by it, we would be awed by it. I promise you, if you sit out in a very dark area, I'm talking about no street lights, very few house lights, if any, and you just look up at the sky, it feels like you can see every star in the world on a clear night. Every star in the world, every star in the universe. You feel like you can see a great deal. And it would cause you to think, I believe, that there is something greater than me in this world. I think that's what some people are afraid of. I think it's not God that people can't see. It's the refusal to accept the fact that I'm not the greatest in creation, because the creation humbles me. God lifts me up. God says that I'm made in his image, and he wants me to know that, and he tells me that so that I can understand that. But when I look at creation around me, I think, I'm just me. And how can God see me through all of this? It's wonderful. By the way, it's good to be humbled. There's nothing wrong with us being humbled. I think most of us need to be, all of us need to be from one time to another. So I hope that you are a humble person. If you're not humble, I hope that it comes to you, and sometimes it can be a hard lesson. But I hope that this idea that God is the creator is something that encourages you. I apologize for the cuts in this video. I've had several interruptions. I've had a cold. I've had to take a break to get a cough drop and all those kinds of things. I've had some folks at the door. And one of the great things I love about this job is that there's always something going on. Why I like that is because I'm not left to believe that I'm alone. One of the wonderful things about creation is that you don't feel alone. When you understand, when you look at creation, you realize that God is always with us. He's here. Mountains don't stop being mountains because I go to sleep. Rocks don't stop being rocks. Birds don't stop being birds. They keep on doing what they're doing. In fact, I've got a bird, or some birds, that every spring like to come up to my bedroom window and build a nest. And there's nothing like waking up as soon as the crack of dawn comes up and those little birds are out there chirping. Believe me, not as pleasurable as you might think, but it just reminds me, that's part of God's wonderful plan. Those birds love that spot for some reason, and those little birds when they're hungry, they're loud. When I think creation is loud, if we take time to observe and to look around us, and just take some time to give God credit for the wonderful things he does. I hope that this has just spurred some thoughts in your mind. Maybe as you watch this, if you're watching it with family, you might talk about some ideas about how God has shown himself in your life and the things that you've seen, the creation, how creation has borne out his existence. I'm so thankful that God loves us. I'm thankful that he loves us enough to prove to us through creation his existence and his being with us. He wants us to know that he's with us. And there will come a day and a time for all of us when we will realize that he has always been and that he always will be. God bless you. I hope you have a wonderful week.